TV. Thanks so much for tuning in to Faith in Politics. As you can see by now, if you've been watching the show, we've made some changes, and that's because we've listened to you, the viewer. We want it to be more relevant and more local, getting out into community and hearing the stories that you have to share. And it's all about finding faith within politics. That's what the show is all about. No matter what island you're on, our heart is to keep you informed with a balanced view. You know, there's a lot going on in this season right now, and there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of polarization, and that is exactly what the enemy is trying to do. As believers in Christ, we have to be reminded that we will always be those that will pick up the pieces, regardless of what happens. Well, what does that mean? For instance, the whole vax debate. Should I get vaccinated? Should I not get vaccinated? Will there be detrimental medical issues in the near future? I don't know. Of course, I have my opinion, but what supersedes all of that is, as a believer, as a follower of Christ, I need to be ready to pick up the pieces, whatever happens. After all, as Malala always says, you know what? We're here and we just want to bring as many people as possible with us to heaven. We know that that day is coming very soon. It really is. So I want to remind you all, as believers in Christ, let's be the difference. Let's be the salt and light to those around us. Yes, all this stuff is very, very polarizing. It's very, very confusing, but remember what you're called to be. We are called to be the bride of Christ, to love on people. No matter what decisions are made, it doesn't matter. We need to just love on people. So guys, let's remember what we're called to be salt and light in this very dark world. We hope you enjoy the program.
Aloha and welcome to Faith in Politics, where we look at politics through the lens of faith, both here in Hawaii and around the world. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Mac Mckeithen, an assistant pastor from Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe, as he discusses critical race theory. We'll also hear from Koch from 40 Days for Life and the prayer vigil they're having right now. Our producer Pete Klaproth speaks with his friend from Australia and hears about the extreme lockdowns that they're having there right now. We'll look at the latest headlines from around the world. But first, as mentioned last week, Kalo TV has a new interview program. This week, we interviewed Hawaii State Representative Gene Ward, and if you're anything like me, you've got some questions. Here's an excerpt from that interview.
Well, I didn't want to get right into our conversation, and I hope we have a chance to come back to you. But I just listened to Governor Ige just now on the news, and he wrote this. He said the unvaccinated are holding us back from opening up. That the majority of people being sick are the unvaccinated. And obviously I want to hear what you have to say about that, but I'm just curious of how are you taking all this in?
You know, the polemics of medicine or the politicization or weaponization of medical data is crazy, because as soon as you said that, I know a study that says the maximum, in fact, it was in Israel, the ones that were filling the hospitals were the vaccinated. They're passing it off as much as the non-vaccinated. So, but where my real pet peeve is, we should be, for those who are very anti-vax, or like one of my colleagues in the House, if he got it, he would probably go into coma like he did when he got a shot earlier when he was a younger person, is where we should have a test. And right now, downtown, you know, we are in White Camilo, about 5 miles from here. There's a company called Oceanit, and it has a spit-in-the-cup test, which is right on the cusp of getting FDA approval. And it's where in 10 minutes, it's like a pregnancy test. Whatever colors your spit turns, you've got it. We should have that available. And we've tried to get the government locally as well as nationally to invest. They haven't done it. He may have to manufacture it overseas, but he still hasn't got the approval. But if we have testing, look, you don't want to get vaccinated? Okay, give me spit in the cup. Okay, come on in, you're okay. We're not using that part of science. We're saying, hey, you're vaccinated, and we're creating there's already a polarity in America between the vaccinated and the not vaccinated. The blue guys, the red guys, the Fox News, the CNN News. There's already a polarity, and this is just kind of buying into that. So I would say the hope of science to me is with the Sullivan, Oceanit, spin in a cup, 10 minutes for $20. And if he goes volume, it'll even be less than that. That's to me where the hope is. So if you don't want to get vaccinated, you don't want to get vaccinated. But this thing about shaming, and I understand there's a lot of guys that are getting their jobs cut or they can't come into the building. And you know what pushes that back on the other side is some of the doctors and the nurses are saying, hey, I'm out of here. I'm not going to get this stuff. In fact, I was in Traub the other day, and the lady said, I've seen too many COVID patients in what it does and how some of the reactions they get after they get the shot, that I'm not going to get near it. So this is America. Our freedoms are being slowly taken away from the people to the government. I know this is not a interview about the book of Revelations, but we're warming up for a centralized, stronger government. And I think the COVID is just another one of those things of spreading the people, divide and conquer by the government.
You're only a few handful of guys in the larger
This is 25%
group.
of the legislature, Republican.
And I don't know. I think probably most people feel like I feel is like I have a voice in my small community, but it's still mandated by a much larger community, and we don't feel like we're really being represented within the larger group.
Malala, when you have a one-party state, that often is the case. And I even grew up as a Democrat. I mean, when you grow up and you don't want to go outside of your comfort zone, even though it's changing now from party to policy, what are your policies? People are getting a real wake-up call with what's going on at the national level. Some of the policies are coming down for what's going to be the cost of gasoline, what's going to be an open border. I've written to Homeland Security, Department of Health, the governor to see, are we taking in any of these residents and migrants? I've got 10 weeks and no answer yet. The whole point of this is where if you don't have an efficient go between the people and the government, people don't have any trust. And we have been, as a state, one of the lowest voter turnout. But I would encourage people, if they think, oh, my vote doesn't count, well, you can be in the stadium at a football game, and the player's not going to hear you shouting, but as you shout together, if you're paying attention, and this is where I don't want to talk to the church too directly, but this is where I really admire what Pastor Hibbs is doing. He's got somebody on his staff that looks at all the legislation, and when it goes contrary to the word, he gets on the phone or gets a lawyer. And some of the shutdown of the church, he was very key at doing. The churches have got God and Mammon, not God and Mammon, Caesar and God, where they give all to God and think that's all they got to do, and they don't have any civil obligations, because half of the people in Hawaii in the churches haven't signed up, and then the half who sign up are not showing up. So that civic responsibility is being negated, neglected, and again, if the pastors are asleep in the pulpit, the people are going to be asleep in the pews. If the pastors are awake saying, look, guys, we got to get political puberty, and I say that in a positive way because a lot of people never wake up until they're 40, 50, 60 years old, and they say, oh my God, politics is important. And some of the people who are in the pews who are called to serve in politics think it's the enemy, just like, as I said earlier, the oxymoron,
Sure.
There's this bad news, it can't be together. But if the church would wake up, rise up, there would be a huge difference in what can be made. And right now it's where we're sort of slipping away and all the
Have you seen
issues.
that over the years? I mean, you've been doing this for a while.
Case in point, I don't know if you remember the Pono Choices, where we're going to
Yes.
teach kids from grade 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 7, 8 to how to have sex, homosexual or bisexual or whatever. It was the minority. Speaking of what the value is, if you're only 4, you got a voice. We spoke out. I was the first one on the floor to speak out on that. And then Representative McDermott worked with the BOE, worked with the, I call them the mama bears, the mothers who came out like they are coming out in Virginia for the critical race theory.
Right.
And they're saying, no, we're not going to put up with this stuff. It's not going to happen. So that stuff where the voice really makes a difference has made a difference.
It comes back to real people. It comes back to, as you have said before, you're talking to business owners, you're talking to, I'm sure, nurses and doctors. We are the same. But my concern is that, yes, it's very political, but there's a risk. And the risk, I think that everyone is seeing now. They're seeing the increase in suicide, mental illness, so on. There's a damage that's being done. And although there is a monetary damage that's being done, there's also psychological.
Yeah, the social, psychological, exactly. One of the family members is in a Hilo hospital dying, and they called upon to get some, how do you pronounce it?
Ivermectin.
Ivermectin. And the physician, the hospital said, no, I can't do it. That would be illegal. I would be in trouble. They took a lawyer and said, we're suing you, doctor. We're suing you, hospital, because there is a right to try. I think that was a national issue, as well as, in fact, I introduced that one like 5-6 years ago. There's a state law that says, look, if you're in trouble and you're like the guy in Hilo is dying, you can't stop them from having that. And to me, that's where the polarity and the belief in the medical profession has really lessened, because on the one hand, you say this stuff saves lives, and you think, oh no, it's horse medicine. By the way, it was made in Japan. So it's a slap in the face of the Japanese, who were the scientists who came up with this ivermectin.
I have seen people personally experience success. Not only success, like within 24 hours.
Before they get it or after they get it?
Before or right as they get it.
Okay,
so
that's perfect.
They well, some was taking it as preventative, and others were taking it like, once I get it, here's my regimen, right? And within literally 24 hours, they were feeling fine.
I don't see why the medical profession is coming so hard. But I mean, they're unionized, they're organized, and they can make life very difficult for them. It's kind of like a union chastising one of the teachers, and they get blackballed and they can't be hired again. But as the Merck stuff came out with approval, this is the first prophylactic that they can take. It's not ivermectin. I forget what the name of it that they do call it. But it's supposedly, if you take it and you got COVID, 50% of whatever you're going to get is lessened. And now that's approved. That's the first thing that otherwise when people get COVID, they say, okay, go home and take Zantac or take some aspirin. I mean, it's like, is that all there is?
We are seeing, as Christians,
yes,
we are seeing our freedom taken away of making decisions for our body. We're seeing our freedoms taken away from our First Amendment to be able to communicate. I know that even our own show has been censored by YouTube. We have had, within the church, there's a split.
Which politician did you have at the end?
Didn't have any politician.
I mean, if you got censored.
It's different names that we use, different topics. But I have seen those things personally kind of erode. And then I'm seeing, just this morning, we've had parents that have gone to their school board and have spoken out about different teachings that they have, primarily this critical race theory, not being taught in school. And then there was one with, as you talked about, sex in school, how to have sex with the same sex, and so on. And so here you have parents with their right to say, I don't want that being taught in my school. And now the FBI is involved to profile those people. So here you have our rights slowly and slowly being censored, being taken away, and so on. And I look to my representatives and I say, what can we do? And what I've heard on the national level, very few Republicans, very few conservatives are speaking out about it. And here I am predominantly in
3 feet away from a Republican.
And I'm asking you, I'm asking the party, any party, Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care what party, how can you help us to stop taking away the rights of our choices? And the one thing, and then I'll be quiet, one thing that I'm really kind of honed in on are these doctors and nurses and state workers, first-line responders that have been frontline to this COVID thing, losing their jobs because they won't get the vaccine.
That is the worst part of the cutting edge right there, for those who are losing their job and those voluntarily saying that, look, I want my health more than I want my job or my well-being. To me, the solution is not an easy one, but we've got to use the science to push back the fear and use these drugs that you said your physician personally denied for you. We've got to get away from it. And then people got to speak out saying, come on, guys, show me that. And somebody will create a study that says, oh, yeah, this is horse medicine. You're a quack if you use it, because that's what they did with the guy on the Big Island, or was it Maui? I mean, they basically shut him down big time. And others who wanted to come to his aid, and I heard this through a very reliable physician, said, then their reputation will go down if they come to his aid. It's frightening unless we wake up and speak out. And that's what you said earlier. There's not enough people speaking out.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing you is our voice does matter. Just keep plugging away, keep inching away. How can our viewers be praying for our government here in Hawaii? What specific thing can we be praying for?
You know, I don't know how to cite scripture by chapter and verse, but I know there's one that says, pray for those in authority over you. And I don't think that's been emphasized in the church, but probably Pastor Hibbs' church and all the other ones who are really saying, pray for those in leaders. You know, one of the lessons of Afghanistan is where you can be smart. I mean, you can be powerful, you can be rich, but that doesn't necessarily make you smart, the way we pulled out of Afghanistan.
Right.
Even when you're smart, it doesn't mean you're going to do the proper thing. So pray for leaders are just like everybody else. They put their pants on one leg at a time. And if they don't have, I mean, look, the beginning of wisdom, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you don't have, and I'm not saying that you got to believe in God to be smart, but if you don't have the wisdom of the Lord, you're going to be falling short in a number of ways. So pray for the wisdom of those who are legislators, those who are, you know, there's a price in working and, you know, waving on the highway and all the other stuff that they do, knocking on doors. Pray that they would be wise and do things according to what they were called to do. And I do think it's a calling. And if there's anybody out there who's called to serve in the electoral process, in the democracy process, don't think it's of the enemy. It's as glorious, it's as much of a calling for those who are in the pulpit. God has got to have his people everywhere, but we've abandoned Hollywood, we've abandoned media, we've abandoned so much. We've given it to the enemy, and politics is one of those places where, hey, if you're a good Christian and a nice person, you can't go in there and fight and argue with them the way you are, because you're supposed to be gentle and nice all the time. Well, no. There's a calling to be a preacher. There's a calling to be a politician. And I know that's contrary to the usual version of it, but I feel very strongly about that. Because once you're there, the Lord will equip you to do it and give you the vision to do it.
Amen. Gene, thank you for being a part of our program.
Thank you for being part of my district as well as this movement to get people activated to do the right thing according to what the scripture says. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
We'll let you know when the full interview is available from Representative Gene Ward. Coming up next, we'll hear from Koch. Stay tuned.
Nobody delivers good news to Hawaii like Kalo TV delivers the good news, because we're the only local Christian TV station that's right here on island with one singular mission: to take the message of Christ even further. What is our mission? You, the body of Christ, encouraged, growing, empowered.
Come and join us.
Can't wait to meet you. Help us spread the good news. The only thing missing is you.
Come on out!
Kalo TV, broadcasting aloha 24/7.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. The Right for Life debate has been heating up. We'll hear from Koch from the 40 Days for Life, who's having a prayer vigil right now. Here's what she had to say.
My story is I like to go to concerts, Christian and secular. Well, on Maui, it's kind of a special place. There's a lot of celebrities there, and they love to be involved in Hawaii. I was given the opportunity to meet Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, so many people that have made Maui their home. Well, Steven Tyler moved to Maui, and he made his home there. So I knew that one day he'd get involved in the community, and he did. I like to listen to radio interviews of these singers or people in the band. The third most watched video for Steven Tyler on YouTube in 2018 was his ex-girlfriend giving her testimony about how he had coerced her into having an abortion. And it was just a haunting video. It's her in her 20s talking about how he wanted her to start a family with her. He took her home at Christmas to ask his mother for the wedding ring. They did not approve, and she said everything changed after that. In January, he went on tour, left her in his New York apartment, locked in a New York apartment. About a month later, he called to say he was sending one of the guys from the band to get her food and get her out. She hadn't left in a month. He opened the door, knocked her out, lit the place on fire. She remembered to roll in the fireplace. Sure enough, a fireman found her. She woke up in the hospital with Steven Tyler next to her, and he coerced her into having an abortion. She was crying throughout the whole video. The ER doctor stabbed a needle into her womb, dilated her, injected something into the baby. And unfortunately, her baby was born alive. And the video was haunting to me because she was crying and crying, they killed my baby, they killed my little boy. And when her baby was born alive back in the 70s, they snipped that baby at the back of the spine, killed the baby. It haunted me, and I was praying in the mornings for the following 3 days after, and God reminded me how many times I'd been at the NICU at Capilani Medical Center, educating and competencing the nurses how to use my medications, looking at these little 2-pound or less babies they're trying to keep alive. And the Lord said to me, Ann, they're killing the babies in the basement of Capilani, but they're trying to keep them alive up on the 2nd floor. I looked up 40 Days for Life. I found it. I got a sign, and I just went down there. People stand in the gap for those who have an unplanned pregnancy, and they really come before the Lord and they pray. So twice yearly in Honolulu from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during Lent in the spring, and right now in the fall, September 22nd through October 31st, we stand on the sidewalk and we pray to end abortion. Now, we also do hand out information to patients going in, and we do pray for the people working there. But that's really the essentials of 40 Days for Life. And it does take place across the nation and around the world in over 600 cities. It's been going on since 2007. And there's been 225 abortion facilities that have closed, and over 19,000 babies saved through 40 Days for Life that we know of. And probably tens and thousands of more lives saved, babies saved, but moms and dads' lives saved from the harm that abortion can cause as well. What we see is that within society, it's just people have become so numb to the idea of abortion. They think it's like washing their hands or taking a shower. It's the marketing through Planned Parenthood, really. I mean, it's sad. I think the last couple generations definitely grew up with this as law. And so they don't realize that it's wrong. They see it as a quick fix to something that's unplanned, that they could go back to their old life. But what they don't realize is the pain and suffering and the shame that they can feel after they have the abortion. Fortunately, we have many resources for counseling and healing and prayer through Rachel's Vineyard, through Calvary Chapel Pearl Harbor. They have a program for men and women for healing. But we'd like to try to catch the people going in beforehand to let them know, hey, explore all choices. No one thinks of the pain they're going to feel afterwards. You have time. You don't have to do this today. Talk to someone you love and trust about it. Really see that it's not the end of the world, and then decide if you want to have an abortion. There's about 1 million abortions per year in the United States since Roe versus Wade was passed in January 1972. And essentially, this is what happened. A young woman named Norma McCorvey in Dallas, Texas, found herself pregnant with an unplanned pregnancy for the 3rd time. She had already surrendered her 2 children to the care of others, but this 3rd time she wanted an abortion. She hired some attorneys, and the attorneys had her sign false affidavits that she was gang raped and that she had seen several doctors who refused to give her an abortion. The Texas law at the time was that only a mother, when medically necessary to save her life, could have an abortion. And that included, that did not include women that were raped. A woman, because she was raped, could not have an abortion. It was not lawful at the time. The Supreme Court ruling, as we all know, in January 1972, ruled in favor of Norma McCorvey, who was Jane Roe. And the 2 essential rulings from that Roe versus Wade was, 1, a woman has a right to privacy, which includes her determining the outcome of her pregnancy. And ruling number 2 is really what affects America. They recognized that a child in the womb does not have any constitutional right. It is not a person. University of Hawaii John A. Burns School of Medicine has the Options Clinic at University of Hawaii. So if a young couple of students call or go to the Options Clinic, if you Google the Options Clinic, it says abortion center. And unfortunately, people think Planned Parenthood does the most abortions in Hawaii, but it's not true. The Options Clinic does. And they're done at Kapilani Medical Center. for women and children at the hospital. The most abortions are done there every year. I often think about Queen Emma. I mean, I think all the hospitals do abortions. They do the most, but I think of Queen Emma, Queen Liliuokalani, Queen Kapiolani. I think they would never have ever wanted this to be the legacy for Hawaiian people, let alone the people living in Hawaii. So what do? We are on the sidewalk with 40 Days for Life. We're one of those people that are down there standing in the gap, offering hope, compassion, and help to these couples. Anybody that comes, if they need financial help, we're there for them. If they just need emotional support and prayer, if they just need counseling, we're there for them, as are our pregnancy centers. We have 3 wonderful pregnancy centers on Oahu who offer that counseling. Very often I find the most common story is, and sometimes we don't have very many people down there praying, is someone's going for an abortion. They ask a simple prayer, Lord, if you don't want me to do this, please give me a sign. And we've heard time and time again how a woman driving by, a couple driving by, will see that one person standing there praying with the sign, and they take that as the sign, and they cancel their appointment. And we've had couples and moms come back to us with their babies, a year later, showing us, hey, if you weren't there, we wouldn't have had this beautiful baby. We have a group of 40 Days for Life prayers that pray for the abortion workers specifically. We intercede for them, and that they would have the courage, that their eyes would be open, that they would leave Planned Parenthood and join us on the sidewalk. One Monday, maybe about halfway through the vigil, 3 workers just up and quit. They just left, place high and dry. So they didn't come to us, but it was wonderful to know that they had the courage to do that. So, another result of prayer. If you are pro-abortion and you believe that the cutoff date is at 9 months, what if that baby is born alive? Do you think we should offer them medical assistance, breathing assistance, to keep them alive? And with science and how it's advanced in the last 10, 15 years, even if a baby's aborted, at 12 weeks, it could possibly live. Do you think that baby should be kept alive? Have you thought about these issues and how the issue of abortion and how science has changed? So we welcome anyone who truly is called by God to come down to the sidewalk and pray. Those that heed the call will just come down and pray, and that's all you have to do. We have sidewalk counselors that will provide information to people going in. They can talk to people that work there that are willing to talk to us. But really it is about prayer. We just want people down there praying for 1 hour. And we always say, just start with 1 hour. What's 1 hour once a week for 6 weeks? Block it off your schedule. We want to create that unbroken chain of prayer from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because God hears the prayers. Bring a friend. We're asking groups, Bible studies, men's groups to come down. Praying from home is fine, but there's nothing like being down on the sidewalk. You could be that answered prayer for someone that's driving by, someone who's made that appointment, someone who's thinking about going in. And even those that are going in not for an abortion, you're planting seeds in that person too. If you're considering an abortion, please explore all choices before you have that abortion. You have lots of time. You don't have to do this right away. You've got 12 weeks or plus. Talk to someone you love about it. Call one of our wonderful pregnancy centers. It's not the end of the world. It's not what you think. And people don't think of the pain and the regret they're going to feel after they have the abortion. And there's 81% of people who have abortions, men and women, suffer from depression after they have their abortion, and 70% return to alcohol and drug abuse. People don't understand what abortion really is, and I encourage people to really find out what an abortion is. It's a violent act, tearing a life from a mother's womb. They're ripped apart limb by limb. That's what the suction abortion does. And after an abortion is performed, someone in Planned Parenthood has to look and make sure that baby is reassembled, because if even a little hand is left inside the mother, it will cause a horrible infection. People don't realize what's happening in there. It is a violent act. It's a violent act against the child, and it's a violent act against the mother and father too.
Powerful stuff happening with that ministry, and I'm sure that they can use help or prayers going forward. Now let's take a look at some of the latest headlines happening around the world.
I've had COVID in the past, and so our understanding of antibodies, of natural immunity has changed a great deal from the onset of the pandemic, and is still evolving. I understand that the vaccine would help if you catch COVID, and you'll be able to have less symptoms from contracting it. But with me having COVID in the past and having antibodies with my current age group and physical fitness level, it's not necessarily a fear of mine. Taking the vaccine, like I said, it would decrease my chances of having a severe reaction, but it does open me up to the, albeit rare chance, but the possibility of having an adverse reaction to the vaccine itself. I don't believe that being unvaccinated means infected, or being vaccinated means uninfected. You can still catch COVID with or without not having the vaccine. I would say, honestly, the craziness of it all, in terms of not being able to say that it should be everybody's fair choice without being demeaned or talked crazy to, doesn't make one comfortable to do what said person is telling them to do. I would say that's a couple of the reasons that, I would say I'm hesitant at this time, but at the end of the day, I don't feel that it is, anyone's reason to come out and say, well, this is why or this is not why. It should just be their decision, and loving your neighbors, not just loving those that agree with you or look like you or move in the same way that you do. It's loving those who don't.
U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland's order for the FBI to basically help police parents is getting pushback from some states. On Monday, Garland ordered the FBI to work with local law enforcement to protect school board members, teachers, and other public school employees in response to what he called a disturbing trend of threats. Now, a slew of Republican attorney generals say Garland's order goes too far and is likely unconstitutional. They say it's a form of intimidation to prevent parents from speaking out on issues like critical race theory. Garland said in his memo that spirited debate about policy matters is protected by the Constitution, but that does not extend to threats of violence or intimidation. Garland's order comes after numerous school board meetings across the country have erupted in chaos as parents voice concerns about critical race theory, transgender policies, and pandemic restrictions. Those debates have led parents and board members to face off in heated discussions and angry outbursts.
You're watching Faith in Politics. Stick around as we address critical race theory coming up.
Nobody delivers good news to Hawaii like Kalo TV delivers the good news, because we're the only local Christian TV station that's right here on island with one singular mission: to take the message of Christ even further. What is our mission? You, the body of Christ, encouraged, growing, empowered.
Come and join us.
Can't wait to meet you. Help us spread the good news. The only thing missing is you.
Come on out.
Kalo TV, broadcasting aloha 24/7.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. As you may know, if you're a parent, schools are now having the debate whether or not to have critical race theory in the classroom. We spoke to Kaneohe Pastor Mac Mckeithen about why this is so dangerous for our children.
What is critical race theory? We see school boards being heard by every sorts of color to talk about critical race theory in a very negative way. Tell me, what is critical race theory?
Well, it's an ideology that's of the devil. That's the short answer. You know what I mean? But because it really is at the core. But they defined it in this way. Say it's based on the premise that race is not a natural, biological, grounded feature of physical distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. That's the definition of it. And this critical race theory is not new. It's been around since the late 90s. But at that time, we're fighting the war on drugs and gang violence, so it didn't gain a lot of traction. And so some 30 years later, as soon as the race card is reinvented and now the race card is profitable, it's time to bring in the critical race theory. It makes perfect sense.
Well, so I understand Black Lives Matter and the movement of Black Lives Matter. Critical race theory is really going to the young kids. Is that correct? Is that what it's going into? Because I'm seeing it at school boards.
Right. Well, so the reason for that is because they're told to teach the children what this theory is, what it's based upon. I mean, and at its core, what it does is it gives people an excuse, of color an excuse, to say, why are you in the current position? and when you're doing that to the children, that's a major issue.
What does that look like? Give me an example of what that looks like.
So you can tell a child who is doing well on his own, understands things, and then come in with this ideology, hey, you're really at a disadvantage. And here's why. So now in the mind of that child, no longer does he feel like, I probably can't even do this or move any higher than what I'm doing now. And then I have disdain for you, who are another color who has an advantage over me. I'm being taught that. So it causes a problem. It causes this disdain between race groups, and it further divides people of color and white and black people in particular.
And it really creates a victim mentality.
It does.
Again, right? And why is it that the black community embraces that so much?
I don't think all the black community embraces
right,
it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't believe that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing those who have a platform embrace it, and from them comes this when they speak it, especially through the media, and people are paying into it. Right. Then if you hear it so long without being grounded in truth, it becomes a good, you know what? Yeah, okay, so they do owe me.
Right.
So the victimization turns into entitlement. Entitlement turns into every problem is somebody else's, the lack of responsibility, the removal of it, right? And then there's no accountability. And when you do point the finger back at me, I can always say it's because of, and point it back.
Right. And I think we talked a little bit about it in our discussion, where a professor would have the kids stand, right? And they would say, if you came from
a family, if your history has a family with chains,
right,
take a step backwards.
Right.
And you continue to go on through these 10 or 15 points. And at the end, you have all the black people in the back and all the white people up front. And then he tells them, this is why you can't get ahead. Now, what do you think happens to the minds of those? And this is the same process,
right?
Just flipped in a different way. Nothing's new under the sun.
And so I think what you're saying is that the people that have platforms, the people that have power, and it really doesn't matter color either.
No, because because it's profitable. You have white people writing about this, making money off of it. Black people doing the same thing.
What do you tell young black men? What are you telling them? What are fathers like yourself that are grounded in the Word of God, that believe we're all fall short of the glory of God? Therefore, I could be racist. Then again, you could be racist, right? Then again, we could have separation. We could all do that. What are we telling our kids?
I mean, not to get ahead of myself, but when you talk about race or anything for that matter, racism or racist and whatnot, the definitions change. And what has happened in this critical race theory in particular, it's racism is not defined as you and I know what racism is, because they gear it towards only one race can be racist, and that's white people.
Right.
So what we tell our children, what I tell my children is the truth. Despite how they feel about it, I don't want to cut corners. I spent a lifetime in the world, you know what I mean? Living that way where every cause seemed good, and you follow through with it because it's the way of the world. But now, truth only. And it doesn't matter what it goes against. And if people want to, call names, oh man, you're a white sympathizer, or you this, it doesn't bother me. Thick skin. And my children want to reject that truth, then that's on them. At least I did the one thing that I'm supposed to be, and that's be obedient.
The truth is we're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory
the
of God, right? That's the truth of it. And regardless of racism or not racism, we all fall short. And those that love the Lord seek Him first and His glory.
That's right.
And as we seek Him and His glory, what happens is we hope that we start to remove ourselves from sin, regardless of what that sin is.
Right.
But that's the reality. That's our reality as Christians. You talk about a different reality that we want to get into now. You talk about, your term is removed reality.
Right.
What is removed reality?
I mean, so the term itself kind of defines itself. What we find ourselves in today is a state of where reality itself is systematically being removed, and especially in the younger generation and the millennials as well. But you see that it's being taught. It's a process that's being portrayed out there to remove reality, and it comes in various forms, and they all converge at the end of the day. But one of the ways we see this remove reality happening is they take factual data from the past, things that have happened, and they infuse it with a false narrative. And now we have this muddy water, but this factual data from the past continues to fuel the false narrative. It seems right, but it's not. It's a lie. It's deception.
How do we spot that? What does that look like?
So it's easy for me. It's easy to spot, and I think everyone should be able to spot it, because what ends up happening is, if you know anything about what the history is, whatever that is, then you can say, compartmentalize the time, and then ask the one question: tell me how this right here is impacted me today. Show it to me. Don't just make a statement. Show it. See, they have a false narrative that's a statement with nothing quantitative behind it.
What I heard, I think Obama said it when he did. He started putting in the healthcare, Obamacare, and he says, and I don't think it was necessarily him, but somebody had said we have to pass it before we can read it, right? so there's this. The reality is, let's just get things moving, and believe me, on the surface, so that when we come back to it, we'll forget about it.
Right.
Right. So how can, when it comes to removed reality, how does that affect us on a daily basis? What does that look like on a daily basis? We can spot it, we can see it. How does that affect even going to the grocery store or going to school? Or what does that look like?
Well, depending upon what that false narrative is, it's going to hang on that in many cases, because what that does is it drives the emotions of people. They feed on that. When they know that a false narrative that removed the reality of the actual situation has energized people, now they use it to their advantage. So, oh, okay. And they keep pressing it. So how I can see it, let's stick with the race theme as it continues. You go out, and I notice now that there's particular attention paid to me. It's like, because there is this apprehensive, like, oh, I don't want any issues. Do not make the black man angry, type thing. Right. And you can sense it. Sure. It wasn't there before. It was, you're number 3 in line. You're number 3 in line. Now it's like, you want to come up? I can take care of you now. And it's this. That's how you can, the jitters, if you will. People are walking on eggshells in many cases, and that's sad for just that particular situation. And also is that they remove the ability to reason. They take it away. You know what I mean? The reason now doesn't mean anything. So facts mean nothing. So you could come with this cause, and then I can present data that refutes it. But the movement's so strong, you just say, oh no, we're not following that. To me, it means this. That's relativism. So no longer is there an absolute truth. There's only relative truth. This is what it means to me. And that is all infused in removing reality.
I noticed that when you talk about the one side, which is very sensitive and very concerned, and it's almost like feeling sorry for you.
Right. There's another side.
Tell me the other side.
Well, I mean, there's an anger on the other side.
Right.
There are people like, I didn't do anything, and I'm getting blamed for everything. And anger sets in, and this is the goal, because if you could get enough people angry, they will actually make this thing that's false seem real.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now you have more violence, and they'll say, see, we told you. We told you. I told you they were all racist. Look what just happened. Or they were all this. Look what just happened. And it's done out of frustration more so than anything else.
How is this seeping into the church?
That's a problem. I'm glad you mentioned that. So there's 2 things here. We should always identify evil. Always.
Right.
Expose the evil.
Right.
That's a good thing. But we should never partner with a evil to identify another evil. And that's what the church in large has done over time with all these movements. We should not get involved in the movement. We should get involved in exposing evil. That's totally different. And so that's what's going on in the church. Once they get involved in stuff and they get in bed so deep, they find themselves at a crossroads like, uh-oh, I'm so far in. If I do this, this is what's going to happen. If I do that, this is what's going to happen. So they make the decision to do nothing.
Right.
They stay right there.
Right. And I've seen churches kind of embrace, versus just bracing their congregation.
Yeah.
They're now over maybe an advertisement or a promo or something like that. Churches that never really embrace the African American month, right? Black History Month.
Yep.
Now embrace it like never before. And I thought that's a pretty hypocrisy way of handling things versus just embracing all. And we should all be welcoming to really everyone. It's really I get really offended when somebody says that we're embracing one culture versus another. I don't see culture, or I don't see color.
Yeah.
I enjoy culture.
Right.
Right.
So long as culture does not, override being a Christian.
Right.
So you can have elements of all cultures just so that it does not override Christ.
Right.
Can't do that. It has to complement the body of Christ and not override it.
Right.
And the church needs to just stick to the scriptures.
Right.
And not all these other things. If you stick to the scriptures, you will expose evil, you will point it out, you will pray about it, you'll do all those things that we need to be doing as a church and not getting involved into all these other things. As your citizen, your rights and your duties, do what you're called to do. But as the body of Christ, do our obedience to Christ.
Yeah, Mac, thanks so much, man.
All right, brother.
Coming. Appreciate it.
All right, my pleasure.
A special thanks to Pastor Mac for that insightful conversation. Coming up, our producer catches up with Judd Field in Australia to hear about the most locked down region in the world. You're not going to want to miss this.
Kalo Outreach encourages us to give back to our communities across Hawaii. It is personal faith in action, a godly mandate where actions speak louder than words. Join us as we love on our community in practical ways. Visit hallowoutreach.com and volunteer, give, or register a community need. Together, we will make a difference to our communities. Kalo Outreach.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. Now we take a look at an internationally troubling situation. Australia, known for its pioneering spirit, is now the most locked down region in the entire world. Our producer caught up with Judd Field, a resident of Australia, who tells us what it's like to live there during these strict lockdowns.
As you probably have seen on any social media stream, Australia is locked down pretty heavily. So what I'd like to do is catch up with a good friend of mine, Judd Field in Melbourne, Australia. Judd, how are you today?
Aloha.
Oh, I forgot to say good day, Judd. How are you?
Yeah, exactly. G'day, mate.
I messed that up. Good day, mate. Yeah. So, Judd, you're in Melbourne, Australia. How are things going?
Yeah, we look outside and we see the sunshine coming, and we're allowed out, I think, 1 or 2 hours a day to enjoy it. So
1 or 2 hours a day.
For exercise. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. And other than that, you have to be in your home.
Yeah. You've got 4 reasons to leave: to get vaccinated, to exercise, to care or give care to someone who needs it, or to work if you're authorised to work for essential. To shop for groceries. Sorry, to shop for groceries.
You're in a lockdown. How many lockdowns have you been in?
As of yesterday, we were the longest lockdown country in the world. We had 246, so today's 247 days.
At one point, you couldn't travel past 3 kilometers from your home. Is that correct?
Yeah, 5 kilometers. Is that 3 miles? Something like that. Yeah, so 5 kilometers from our home. That's now been moved to 10 kilometers. So that's 6 miles, is it? Something like that.
How do they know? What are they doing to check this out?
Police come up and ask for your papers, please. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody, but that sounds very familiar to me. helicopters flying over at midnight all the time, just intimidation and letting you know that you've got to stay in your, stay inside and stay in your boundaries. So our curfew's actually 9 o'clock. It was 8 p.m. So you had to be home by 8 p.m. No reason were you allowed out, basically, unless you were an Uber driver.
What happens if you are caught outside of those borders?
They'll arrest you, and there's fines for business, fines for individuals. There's fines for under 15-year-olds. I think it was like $180 for a child if a child's out. I don't even know how they know how the child's going to pay for that. But anyway,
if you wanted to travel across the border from one state to the other, what happens?
At the moment, we can't even leave our 10K radius. So you're not going anywhere near a border at the moment. But yeah, the borders have been closed near the start of the lockdown, the original lockdown. There was a few just entrepreneurs, I guess you call them. There was a wedding photographer called Rukshan, and he just decided to start going to some of the protests and things with his camera and start filming it and just live streaming to social media, literally just showing what's going on at the protest. So you come home, you watch the protest all afternoon, and then you watch the nightly news and you see the little edit of, just the little ruckus at the end. But you miss the entire journey of the protest where they're just peaceful. They're literally just wanting to sit there on the street, make their protest and then go home. They're walking away from the police in full riot gear with, they've been shooting rubber bullets into the crowd and firing pepper spray and all sorts of stuff into the crowd. This is the first time the public's been fired on. And they are walking away. They're walking away with their hands up, getting shot in the back kind of thing. In one particular case, they were, for 4 or 5 hours, they were corralled down streets. The police were on sort of an overpass and they were shooting, a pepper spray down into the crowd. And so I guess the crowd's just had enough and burst through the police lines. So then what you catch on the news that night is the bursting through the police line. Police get trampled, violent protesters. And so when you see that almost every protest, you go, we're not being told the truth. So everyone's starting to watch these social media guys. They're turning up their home, intimidating them, telling them not to come. And anyone that's trying to arrange a rally is getting visited. And so it's incredible intimidation, really is.
What are the casualties as of right now in Australia? How many people have died from COVID?
1,300.
1,300 people, which is a small percentage. I think it's tiny, right?
And 26 million or something. Yeah.
I think we're at 28 million now, Judd. Although I left, so that's maybe 27 million now. But yeah.
Half of Victoria's leaving at the moment, so there might not be many left.
And why are they leaving, Judd?
247 days in lockdown is really no way to live. So they had, I think 47,000 people left in the last year or something like that, or the last measurement. We're all thinking, I wonder if we could get a job interstate. I wonder if we could move into the country and, be free again. You can't live like this. The kids aren't going to school.
So now I'm hearing that Daniel Andrews, the premier, the governor, is saying you're not going to have any rights unless you're vaccinated. That's the future.
He's putting these little teasers out. When we get to 80% vaccinated, then we'll let the people that are vaccinated go and have a picnic in the park for a couple of hours in the middle of the day.
Now, I understand a lot of people are losing their jobs over the vaccine mandate.
Well, they're not allowed to force people to have it. And so they're sort of putting the pressure on companies to do it. Because it's happened sort of relatively quickly, we've just had, till the 15th of October, I think people have got to be vaccinated or they can't go to work. Legal people are in a panic. They're all going through constitution stuff and going this, you've got no right to actually say that, to force people to be part of a medical experiment till 2023 or something. I've got some friends who've got some very heavy-handed bosses that are like, you won't be working here if you're not vaccinated. And
what about going to church in Melbourne at the moment?
Well, there's no church going at the moment. One pastor got arrested for trying. I think he was put in jail for 20 days or something for opening up. So everything's just online church. We sit in our lounge room and have communion, and Yeah, that's it. It's online church or nothing. And so the rules that have just come out, by the 15th of October, pastors have to be vaccinated to run their live streams. You're kidding. Work that out. I can't see the science in any of this, so I get very frustrated because there just doesn't seem to be any logic or, any science. So
how can we, believers over here in Hawaii at the moment, how can we be praying for you guys, for the church there in Australia?
Yeah, I'm in two minds about how this is actually playing out, because in one case, I think this has actually been good for the church, because what it's done is actually it's removed this need for us to rely on the pastor to do all the work, whereas I think this is forcing people to have their own relationship with God. There's no, there's no weekly connection like that. It's the online thing's very cold, and so people are being forced to have their own relationship with God, and I think it's almost like there's a choose you this day who you will serve moment for the church. People are either being spewed out or they're being drawn closer, and I feel like God's purifying his church and purifying his bride, and so in that case there's some positives. It's making people lean into God, and you're seeing the signs of the times, and you're going, okay, maybe we're getting close. And so you're starting to think with that urgency and that the desperation of time being short, and okay, we've got to preach the gospel, and can I speak to my neighbours, and that kind of urgency is being put on us. So I think to absolutely pray for that to continue. The toll it's taking on our kids. I was just looking at the stats yesterday. It's in Victoria, it's 342 teens per week are attending hospital for mental health emergencies. That's up 57%. And 37 of those are requiring resuscitation on arrival. So that's up 83%.
Kids committing suicide or trying.
I had one lady ring me up. My daughter's just jumped in her car to go and drive into a tree. How do I, can you pray for me? What do you say to that? It's just that kind of mental strain is just, I think that's the hardest thing. And we definitely need prayer for that, and freedom from this. The kids just need to be able to see their friends, just have this social interaction, just doing online school, and, kids are crying and not wanting to go do this online thing anymore. And there was like this growing angst between the building industry and the Premier. In the high-rise buildings, they have their mess room or tea room. The Premier's closed that. They can't meet because it's a place of congregation, so we won't let them. So the response to that was, scientifically, we need to close the building industry because we've had some cases come out of there. Basically, they shut the building industry down like that, and a guy took his tool belt off and just jumped off the building. You're living on the edge, and when that kind of thing happens, obviously for some people it's just too much. There's no transparency of what the cost of these lockdowns are, and I've lost more people to suicide than I have to COVID. So, who are we saving? What are we saving here?
Thanks, Judd, for sharing, and we will be praying for you. And come to Hawaii already. Come on.
Oh, please. We might be moving there at this rate. If they'll let us out, we'll be there.
All right, bro. Well, God bless you, man.
Same to you.
We'll continue to pray for the situation in Australia, of course, for the mental, spiritual, and physical health of the people. Hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel very soon. Thank you so much for watching Faith in Politics. As always, we could not do this without your help, so please consider donating to us. If you'd like to reach out, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. For Faith in Politics, I'm Brennan Scarborough. Aloha.